Welcome to People Doing Good for Others. Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we honor and celebrate and hold in the light those who truly make significant contributions in our communities. I want to thank Wilkes Communications and RiverStreet Network and WIFM for this opportunity. I'm Gary York, and again, this is People Doing Good for Others. Our featured guest today is Dr. Stuart Hobbs. He's a director of the local RISA, which is an educational support group here in Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro. He's a lifelong educator and learner. He grew up in Clinton, North Carolina. His PhD is from UNC Greensboro. He's been the superintendent in Stokes and Yadkin County. So please stay with us for a most informative and interesting session today. So good morning to you, my friend.
Good morning, Mr. York.
Thank you, and I want to thank Don Martin for bringing us together. So have you known him forever?
I've known Don Martin for probably 25 years and had the privilege of being one of his colleagues when I was superintendent for 12 years. And I leaned on Don Martin a lot.
I bet.
With his expertise and his experience when I was starting out as superintendent. And then especially when I came up to the Northwest region, to Stokes County and Yadkin County, I called Don Martin a lot, especially
I do too. He's been a big helper for me, and I so cherish that relationship. Dr. Stuart Hobbs, let's go back to growing up in Clinton and some of those role models maybe, or people that helped you along the way and who encouraged you to maybe to go to school.
Right. Well, like I said, I grew up in Clinton, North Carolina, about 60 miles from the coast. We call it the hog capital of the world. Okay. My daddy said it's smell of money. But enjoyed growing up. I had a great childhood, and I was an athlete, and I wanted to, that's what I wanted to do when I got out of school. And I had a football coach by the name of Bobby Robinson, a very successful football coach down there, and he encouraged me to go into education and come back and work with him. He's been like a second father to me, and still is.
Still is.
Mm-hmm. We have a great relationship. And so I went off to UNCW and came back to Clinton and worked with him for a couple of years. And then left and took some other situations in education. And then finally I coached for 10 years, and then I decided I wanted to go into administration, and I felt like I wanted to make a difference, and I felt like going into administration was the way for me to do that. A lot of people never thought I'd be a principal or superintendent, but I've been very successful and enjoyed every minute of it.
How about the classroom?
I started out as a health and PE teacher, taught some science, taught some driver's ed, taught a little bit of history, and I coached football for 7 years, baseball for 10, basketball for 3, and wrestling coach for 1 year, which I didn't know a lot about wrestling, but I call it wrestling.
Yeah.
But no, it was good, and then I moved into the principalship and just continued to work my way
now,
up.
a person that moves, say, from being a classroom teacher, coach to administration, is that in the master's arena, kind of?
Yes, sir. When I decided to go into administration, I went back to school and got a master's degree in educational leadership.
Educational leadership.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And probably, one of my most fulfilling jobs was a high school principal, because you could develop such great relationships with these students, and it was a joy to see a ninth grader come into. I was a high school principal for all of my career, so it was a joy to see a ninth grader come in, and you work with them for 4 years, and there were some challenges, but to see them graduate in 12 years and be successful, and I have a lot of friends that I was principal. I was there, served as their principal, and we've kept in contact with each other. And when I go back home or anywhere, and all of a sudden I was at the beach this week working with a company to put a pool in at our beach house, and one of the companies was a student of mine when I was a principal. He owned the company, and I didn't realize it until I get down there and start talking to him, and his dad worked for me. So it was very enjoyable to see students that have really been successful and develop those relationships that last a long time.
Yeah. So I liked what you said about seeing them come in the ninth grade, and you become part of the family as a principal, I think.
I became a big part of the family, and I tried to develop a close relationship, not only with the students, but also with the parents, so that, if there's so many challenges that high school kids face now, and they did back then, and it was beneficial to me, and especially to the student, if I developed relationships with the parents as well, so that I could pick up the phone and call and talk to them and say, this is what we need to do to make sure your child's successful. And
wow.
And it was really interesting. As principal of Hopton High School down in Sampson County, that school was actually named after a great-great-grandfather of mine. And most of the kids there, I grew up with their families and their parents, and knew the grandparents and all. So it was really interesting going back. When I went to back to Sampson County to Hopton High School, I knew pretty much all of my students and their families, and I could talk to them in a way that a lot of principals couldn't.
Wow. All right, so you want to talk about going back to UNCG for your advanced degree, your doctorate?
Yes, sir. When I went into administration, like I said, I was going to be a lifelong coach. I was going to be one of these coaches that they drug off the field 70 kicking and screaming, and then I decided to go into administration. And after serving as a principal, I can't sit still. I wanted to do what I could do to make the most impact on student and student success. So I decided to go back to school and get my doctorate degree. I went to UNC Greensboro and to get my doctorate degree, very successful there. I had a professor, Dr. Dale Brubaker, who has since passed, but Dr. Brubaker worked with me. I owe a lot to him for getting my doctorate degree, because he sat me down and said, this is what you need to do. And if you do this, you will be successful. And he walked me right through all the steps, was there with me for 5 years while I was working on my doctorate and writing the dissertation. Was
that a good experience? Tell us a little bit about your dissertation.
My dissertation, it was very interesting. It was on religion in the public schools.
Wow.
And it was a follow-up to a dissertation that a gentleman, former Superintendent Dr. Sam Houston, had written
I know about him.
Up to the 1990s, and I picked up from the 90s and went to 2000s, and it was very interesting how religion in the schools have changed so much over the course of the years, and things you can do, things you can't do, lawsuits, case studies that had been presented. And another interesting thing was how it varies from across not only North Carolina, but across the entire country, whereas a court case in California could be really different than a court case on the eastern coast or in North Carolina.
Okay.
But it was very fulfilling and to learn the do's and the don't. And I was brought up in a very strict Southern Baptist home, and you know, and I value my faith, you know, and it was very interesting to some things that I just assumed you could do in the schools, in education, because I always said that was the right thing to do. That in some situations you couldn't do that.
Right.
But it was very interesting, and it helped me in my career as far as when a principal would call me and say, "Hey, this is what we want to do. You know, we want to have a prayer session every morning, or
Right.
join us around the flagpole, and can we do that?" So it was interesting to me. Now, I'm not an expert by no means. One of the first things I learned as a superintendent was you have a school board attorney, a school attorney, you need to rely on them because I'm not an expert in law. I'm an expert I'm very knowledgeable of education.
Good. Dr. Stuart Hobbs, tell us about Stokes County, and you were superintendent and in Yadkin County, and those experiences, and how does it transpire, and how do you get connected with the school boards, and just some of the ins and outs of being the top person in a system.
Well, I came to Stokes County in 2008 after serving 5.5 years in Sampson County as superintendent. One of the first things that I realized is there's a big difference between southeastern part of the state and northwest part of the state. And a lot of people don't realize that well, it's North Carolina, but our demographics here were very different. Belief systems were different in a way, but I had the opportunity to come to Stokes County. My wife was associate dean at the medical school at Wake Forest, and so it was very beneficial. I came in 2008, had a great relationship with the Board of Education, and that's what I still do some aspiring leadership, aspiring superintendents consulting, and that was one of the first things I tell a beginning superintendents is you need to develop a close relationship, open and honest communication with that Board of Education.
That's the first thing.
First thing, you need to develop a close relationship because they're your bosses, and they're going to rely on you to tell them to take policy and to take anything that needs to be approved by the board. They're going to rely on you. They're not the superintendent. They're policy-making board. And so they got to rely on you, but you have to have that open and honest communication.
Trust.
Big time trust.
Big time trust.
Because the other thing I tell is, as a superintendent, it stops at you. And there's a lot of things that decisions that you're going to make that you're going to have 50% of people that are happy with you and 50% of people are not happy with you. It's sort of like being a referee.
Right.
But I always said, do what's right for kids. And that's what I used to tell board members. Anything I bring to you, I'm going to have researched it, and it's the right thing to do for kids. How can we make sure that we're providing a quality education for every student? And there's some things that are not very popular, but again, if you do what's right for
something you mentioned earlier in our session today about watching kids or seeing a child come in as a 9th grader and graduate and go on. Just yesterday, I was in a setting in a high school and had the opportunity to talk to some students, and I mentioned a scholarship, the teaching fellows, that I was the screening committee, and after I finished, immediately one of the youngsters came up and said, "Tell me about that." thinking, would I qualify?
Right.
And being, going to the top of her class and some things. And so that's what you're saying, isn't it? Being that helping hand is that role model as a principal and as a superintendent is, I'm a servant here. I think that's how it is, I think.
Yeah, we're there for every teacher, educator, board member should be there for kids and to do what's right for our students.
Right.
You know, keep the politics aside. Is this in the best interest of our students? And one of the best principles I ever had, I'll share this story with you about doing what's right. One of the best principles I ever had, and I'm sure he will not mind if I use his name was Tony George. Mr. George, I hired him at West Stokes High School. And when he came in, he was very open and honest with me. When I interviewed him, he said, Dr. Hobbs, if you want somebody to, I'm not very knowledgeable on curriculum and instruction. I have people that, I'm gonna make sure the teachers are teaching what they need. But what I am strong at is relationships with students and parents. So I'm gonna make sure that our students are learning, but it's also they wanna be at school. And I hired him, and week before school started, teachers came to me, some teachers, veteran teachers came to me and said, Dr. Hobbs, we need to talk to you. Okay, what do you need to talk to me about? And they said, our principal said that for the first 3 days of school, we couldn't open up a book, a textbook, and teach. And we've got to get to teaching. And I said, well, what did he say you're supposed to do? And he said, what we're supposed to do is get to know these students, because you have no idea what these students' background they're coming from, what they're doing. You don't know if they leave school, if they're sleeping in your class every day, why they're sleeping in your class. It could be that they're lazy, but it also could be that they have to leave school and go work a job to help support their family.
Wow.
And he did that, and he developed. I never had a phone call from a parent. I never had a phone call from a board member saying, that school, kids wanted to be there. They learned, their test scores improved drastically. Parents wanted their kids to go there. I had a parent call me one day, and she said, I just want to thank you for that principle. And she said, I had trouble getting my child to school because I was taking them, and I kept having car trouble because my tires I needed new tires.
Really?
And what Mr. George did was he got on the phone, called the business, said, I need some tires put on a lady's car. And she said, he called me up and said, take your car down to the tire dealership, and they put 4 brand new tires. And she said, so that solved that issue. My child is up and say, hey, I need to get to school. Come on, let's go. And so
Thank you for that.
It's things like that as far as developing relationship. You know, we have a challenge, and it continues to be a harder and harder challenge as far as educating our kids and make sure they're prepared for the workplace. And I think it goes back to relationships, because every child's not going to a 4-year university. You know, we need to find what this child wants to do and make sure we're steering them in that direction, providing all
help them get there.
Providing all the help and benefits that we can to make sure they're successful, because they're our future. And if we don't do it, they're going to fall through the cracks. So we got to make sure, and I say this all the time, we're about educating all children, not just the cream of the crop, but every child. And so we've got to do everything that we can, and that's part of me going into education and going into superintendency.
That was the calling.
That was my calling. And you know, now as a superintendent, I had a much more direct impact on what happened in our schools. But the one thing I really missed was that relationships that I had with students, because especially in elementary school and even up into high school, there's a lot of students, they don't know who the superintendent is.
Right.
They have no idea who the They know that superintendent's the man that calls us when he cancels school because of the weather. That's what they know. But you know, I tell this story a lot. I used to do a lot of deer hunting and harvested a deer, and I was cleaning the deer. A friend of my dad's and his grandson came out, and his grandson was in kindergarten in one of my schools, and his granddaddy looked at him and said, "Hunter, do you know who this gentleman is?" And he said, "Well, I know he's Mr. Less's son." He said, "But do you know what he does in the school system? He's the most important person that comes to your school." Hunter said, "No," and his granddaddy said, "Well, think about it for a minute." So Hunter walked around, kindergarten kid, and he looked up at me, and finally he said, "Sir, I know exactly who you are. You're the man they let come cut the grass at our school." And I tell that story because to a kindergarten, the most important person wasn't the superintendent. The most important person was the man that came and cut that grass so that they could get on the playground and play.
Wow.
So that's the one thing I miss. I truly enjoyed being a superintendent. Like I said, I left Stokes in 2011 and went to Yadkin County. And I prided myself on being a superintendent that was accessible. If you called me, I don't care who you were, I would always return your call. I was about solving problems, not creating more.
And hiding from them.
Right, and we also, we moved our academic performance in Stokes County. When I left there, we were 9th in the state as far as where we ranked as far as our academic performance. And I went to Yadkin, and Yadkin said, "I want the same thing." And I tell people all the time, I didn't do it. You know, I was leading it. I believe you surround yourself with good people, let them do their job, tell them what you expect, and you can be successful. And the Yadkin County educators, they stepped right up, followed me, and we greatly improved our academic performance there.
What are some of the things that you bring the implementation of that make it better? How do you, that inspiration maybe is the word of, how do we do that?
Well, I go back, I'm a people person.
Okay.
And I prided myself on being visible and being open and honest, and I was not a superintendent that stayed in the office. I didn't want to sit in my office. I wanted to be out in the schools, going into every classroom, talking to every teacher, custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers.
Yep.
You know, I'd take a superintendent's job and I'd go to bus drivers meeting, and they'd look at me and they'd say, "Well, we've never had a superintendent that showed up for a bus drivers meeting." And I said, "Well, I need to hear from y'all. If there's something I need that you need, I need to hear from you, because in my opinion, you're one of the most important persons to me. But I'm entrusting my 7-year-old grandchild in your hands every morning when they get on the bus. And for some of these kids, you're the first smiling face they see in the morning, and you're the last smiling face you see in the afternoon." Cafeteria workers, I'd go in cafeterias and eat and talk to the cafeteria workers, because there's a lot of kids that the only hot meal they had was at school. And it was about developing relationships so that all the people that worked for me as a superintendent, they wanted to be there. They know I valued what they did. I was constantly saying we need to thank people for the job they do. We also need to recognize our successes and celebrate those. I implemented in every school system I was at, we did good news to start a board meeting.
Good news.
Good news. Anything that had to do with good news at the board meetings, we recognized students, we recognized teachers, employees, but then also at every meeting I had with my staff, principals meeting, and I still do it now when I meet with superintendents here and job alike groups here in Northwest RISA, I always start my meeting with good news. Tell me any good news that you have, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in your school or in your district. It can be, I've got a new grandbaby, because I need to know, I want to know the good things that are happening. So many times we only hear negative stuff.
Right.
I want to hear the good news, and I want to celebrate that good news. So it goes back to just, for me, is developing relationships, being a people person, being out and knowing what's going on. Tell me what I need to do as a superintendent to make a difference in your school.
Oh, wonderful. Availability.
Availability, accessibility, and being visible.
Wow, my goodness. So tell us about your wife and her career and then her journey in life, if you will.
Well,
professional.
She started out as a dental hygienist, and that's what she went to school for, and then she moved into community colleges teaching dental hygienists, and ended up moved to Wake Forest and started a program called CERTL, Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Research, and did professional development for medical schools. She totally revamped the Wake Forest Medical School curriculum to a problem-based learning, and she worked with doctors on how to teach medical students. That was one of the things that she was seeing was doctors at medical school, besides practice, they also have to do either research or they have to teach in a medical school. And these doctors knew how to do open heart surgery, but they didn't know how to teach it to students. So she moved to a more problem-based learning, and then she became associate dean for the medical school, and then she retired.
Her name?
Dr. Ann Lambrose.
Lambrose.
And so she's a smart one in the family, I tell everybody.
Thank you. Now let's move on to RISA here in Wilkesboro. Tell us about what does RISA mean and what do you do? Okay.
Northwest RISA stands for Regional Education Service Alliance, and we provide professional services, quality professional development, and support for our district school systems. We have 12 school systems in the Northwest, and then also North Carolina School for the Deaf. And we partner with Appalachian State and Wilkes Community College as well. And they help us in providing professional development. The state is divided up into 8 educational regions, and we're the Northwest. And like I said, we provide support for all of our school districts, especially in professional development. And to simplify it a little bit, if Elkin City Schools is in our school district, if they wanted to bring in a consultant to work with their high school math teachers, it wouldn't be cost efficient to do that because they probably have 5 math teachers at their high school.
Right.
So what we do, we plan the professional development for them, and then all the districts in our region can send their high school math teachers for professional.
So you make it affordable.
Yeah, we make it very cost affordable. It's just, again, it's a way to provide support to those school districts because they can't do it. They don't have the resources to do it themselves. Right. But if you pull your money together, each school district pays an annual membership.
Right.
And we sit down and we talk to their curriculum folks, their principals, their superintendents, and say, all right, what do you need from us? And how can we support you? And then we plan out our professional development for the year. And then if something comes up during the year, we're also start planning out. I'm in the process right now of planning a beginning principals workshop.
Leadership.
Yes, sir. And people are not going into education like they used to, and so what we've seen is we're putting these people into principalship, and they're saying, wait a minute now, I need help on this. How do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? And so we just provide support for them. We also do what we call job alike meetings, where we meet with superintendents, we meet with principals, and that's more of a roundtable discussion. You know, tell me what you're doing in Wilkes County. Right. I got this problem. How can I fund technology, or what can I do as far as I'm having this issue, and just discuss it. You learn so much from just communication between each other.
And Dr. Ann Langford?
Dr. Ann Langford, she came on this year. She handles all of my curriculum and instruction. She's a huge benefit for me. I'm very fortunate to have her. Yeah. But we're excited about, you know, she just came on, I came on, and we're excited about the direction we're going.
Good. And is this does it start at 8 to 5, and where is it, and the working parts of it? Tell us about that.
Well, we have my office manager and administrative assistant. She works 8 to 5. We're located at the Holiday Inn Express here in Wilkesboro. Uh-huh. Dr. Langford is part-time, and I'm part-time. So our office hours are very flexible. But you know, and then we have some meetings. We'll be up in Allegheny County, or we'll go to Burke County. Yeah. So we're not always in that office, but you know, we're always looking for support for our school systems, and we've been very appreciative.
Dr. Stuart Hobbs, I want to thank you for being here today, and we want to thank Wilkes Communications and RiverStreet and WIFM, and this has been quite an eye-opener in education, and I really liked you talking about relationship with your school boards and being visible and being available and being out there. So what an enlightening moment in my life, and I want to thank you for being here. So you want to close for us?
Yes, sir, I'll be glad to. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here, but a lot of people have no idea what RISA is, right. Northwest RISA. And I would invite them anytime they would like to come down to the Holiday Inn, to our offices, and just learn. So many people, you know, there's a lot of, public education is very different than a business model. So I invite them to come down. We're always looking for resources. Any way you can help us, we certainly would love to talk to anybody, and you know, we can work together to continue to grow our future.
And you've blessed us in countless ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Stuart Hobbs on People Doing Good for Others, and I'm Gary York. Thank you for being with us.